She was known as the useless fat girl of high society. But when her own father handed her over to an Apache warrior as punishment, no one could have imagined she would find the purest love ever known. In the grand halls of the Thompson estate, where crystal chandeliers reflected the wealth of one of Arizona's most powerful families in 1847, lived Clara, a 24-year-old woman whose name stood in cruel contrast to the ridicule that filled her days. Her robust figure, round cheeks, and hazel eyes had been a source of family shame since she turned 15 and failed to secure a suitor at her debut in society. "Look at her stuffing herself with sweets again," whispered her mother, Mrs. Elizabeth Thompson, as she watched Clara from the marble balcony overlooking the main garden. "A lady of her status should have more self-control." The words fell like drops of poison on Clara's already wounded heart. She had learned to find solace in her grandmother's books and the sweets she secretly took from the pantry when no one was watching. Mr. William Thompson, a 60-year-old man whose gray hair spoke of decades building the family's empire, observed his daughter from his study window with a mix of disappointment and cold calculation. His other 5 children had secured advantageous marriages that expanded both the family's fortune and political influence. But Clara, his only daughter, had become a growing burden with each year she remained unmarried. The night of the grand seasonal ball arrived as a desperate last chance for Clara. Mrs. Elizabeth had ordered the most expensive dress money could buy, royal blue silk with gold thread embroidery, hoping its opulence would distract from her daughter's robust figure. But as Clara descended the marble staircase into the main ballroom of the Thompson estate in Arizona, the whispers and pitying glances cut into her soul like daggers. "Who would want to dance with such a whale?" murmured the young Count of Prescott, not bothering to lower his voice. His words were met with nervous giggles from other young men of high society, who found cruel entertainment in Clara's humiliation. She felt as if the marble floor might swallow her whole, yet she maintained the composure years of aristocratic upbringing had instilled. Throughout the evening, Clara sat with the older matrons, watching as other girls her age glided elegantly across the dance floor with suitors who would never approach her. Her mother-of-pearl fan trembled slightly in her hands as she tried to keep a dignified smile, but inside, she was crumbling piece by piece. When the ball ended and the family returned home in their gilded carriage, the silence spoke louder than any reproach. The next day, Mr. Williams summoned Clara to his study. The walls, lined with law books and maps of the family's vast Arizona properties, bore silent witness to a conversation that would forever alter Clara's fate. Pacing back and forth, his mahogany cane tapping rhythmically against the wooden floor, Mr. Williams searched for words to express his frustration. "Clara," he began, avoiding her gaze, "you are 24 years old. At your age, your mother had already borne 3 children and secured alliances that greatly benefited this family." He paused, gesturing vaguely toward her. "But you have proven to be a failed investment, a shame to the Thompson name." The words struck Clara like hammer blows. She had heard variations of this speech for years, but never with such raw cruelty. Her hands clenched into fists on her lap as she fought to maintain her composure. "I have decided," her father continued, "that it's time to find a definitive solution to your situation. Tomorrow, an Apache prisoner arrives at the military fort, a warrior captured during recent skirmishes on the frontier." Mr. William paused before his mahogany desk, picking up an official document. "The authorities have agreed to my proposal. You will be given to this savage as his companion. At least this way you'll serve a purpose, keeping a dangerous prisoner in check." Clara's world reeled. For a moment she thought she had misheard. "Father," she murmured, her voice trembling, "are you serious?" "Completely serious," he replied with icy coldness. "I can no longer afford to maintain a daughter who contributes nothing to this family. At least this way your existence will have some purpose. You'll prevent us from having to execute the Apache, and you'll finally have a husband, even if he's a savage." Clara rose slowly, feeling as if she were floating outside her own body. "You're selling me to a prisoner of war?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm giving you a chance to be useful for the first time in your life," Mr. William retorted without a trace of compassion. "The Apache's name is Cale. Tomorrow, you'll be taken to the territory assigned to him as a reservation. Consider this your arranged marriage, only with someone of your level." That night, as Clara packed her few personal belongings into a leather trunk, she cried for the first time in years. But amid the tears of pain and humiliation, something unexpected began to take root, a strange sense of liberation. For the first time, she would be free from scornful gazes, cruel comments, and the constant feeling of being a living disappointment. At dawn, as the carriage pulled away from the Thompson estate, carrying her toward the unknown, Clara didn't look back. She had no idea she was heading toward an encounter that would transform her life in ways she could never have imagined. The Apache territory stretched under the relentless Arizona sun like a land forgotten by time, where red rocks contrasted with the vivid blue sky, and the wind carried whispers of freedom and resistance. Cale had been brought to this place not as punishment but as part of an experimental initiative by the U.S. government. They aimed to establish reservations where captured warriors could live in controlled peace rather than face execution. The experiment included providing them with Mexican or American wives to civilize them and produce mixed offspring deemed easier to control. When the dusty carriage stopped in front of the adobe cabin that would be her new home, Clara stepped down with trembling legs and a heart pounding like a war drum. The desert air was unlike anything she had known, dry, hot, charged with a wild energy that made her feel strangely alive. Her silk skirts, so fitting for the ballrooms of Arizona's elite, looked absurdly out of place in this arid landscape. Cale emerged from the cabin's shadow like a figure from legend. At 30 years old, he was tall and strong, his skin bronzed by the desert sun, with black hair falling to his shoulders. His dark eyes held the depth of someone who had seen both glory and tragedy. When he looked at Clara, she felt as if she were being judged by someone who saw beyond superficial appearances. "This is the woman they send me?" he asked in clear English, though with a distinct accent, addressing the captain who had escorted Clara. His tone carried disbelief, making her cheeks burn with shame. "Do you think I'd accept someone handed to me like a bone tossed to a dog?" The captain, an older man accustomed to dealing with defiant prisoners, hardened his expression. "You have no choice, Apache. This woman is part of the agreement. Treat her with respect, or you'll return to the military prison." The words hung in the air like a threat both prisoners understood all too well. Clara found her voice for the first time since arriving. "I didn't ask to be here either," she declared with a dignity that surprised everyone, including herself. "But here we are, so we'll have to find a way to make this work." Her words were direct, devoid of self-pity. Cale looked at her with renewed attention. After the captain left, raising a cloud of dust, Clara and Cale stood alone before the cabin, two strangers bound by circumstances neither had chosen. The silence stretched between them like the desert itself, vast, uneasy, but brimming with unexplored possibilities. "I'm not going to pretend this is a real marriage," Cale said finally, crossing his arms over his bare chest. "You're an imposition from the U.S. government, another way to humiliate me beyond what they've already done." His words were harsh but not cruel, as if he were laying down the ground rules for their forced coexistence. "I understand," Clara replied, surprised by her own calm. "I didn't choose this either. My family sent me here to get rid of me. I suppose we're both prisoners in different ways." It was the first time she had voiced the truth of her situation so clearly, and it felt strangely liberating. The first days were a careful dance of avoiding conflict. Cale left early to hunt and tend to the small crops he had planted, while Clara stayed in the cabin, exploring her new home and trying to adapt to a life utterly unlike anything she had known. The cabin was simple but functional. 2 separate rooms, a kitchen with a stone hearth, and handmade furniture that showcased the warrior's craftsmanship. It was when Clara found medicinal herbs drying in the kitchen that she discovered the first point of connection with her forced companion. She instantly recognized several plants her grandmother had taught her to identify in the gardens of the Thompson estate: chamomile for calming nerves, comfrey for healing wounds, willow for easing pain. Without thinking, she began organizing the herbs by their healing properties. When Cale returned that afternoon and saw her work, he stopped short. "How do you know about herbal medicine?" he asked, stepping closer to inspect her arrangement. His voice had lost the hostile edge of earlier days. "My grandmother was a healer before she married my grandfather," Clara explained, gently touching the dried leaves. "She taught me in secret because my mother thought it wasn't proper for a lady of society. But I've always been fascinated by the idea of helping people heal." For the first time since her arrival, Kale looked at her with something akin to respect. I use these plants to treat hunting injuries and minor illnesses, but there are some I don't know how to prepare properly, he said, pausing as if weighing his next words carefully. Could you teach me? That simple question marked the beginning of a subtle but profound shift in their relationship. Over the following weeks, Clara and Kale spent their evenings working together with the medicinal herbs. He taught her about the unique properties of desert plants, while she shared the preparation techniques she had learned from her grandmother. Their hands occasionally brushed as they made ointments and tinctures, creating moments of accidental intimacy neither knew how to interpret. One afternoon, as they prepared a salve for sunburns, Clara dared to ask a personal question. "Did you have a family before you were captured?" she asked softly, keeping her eyes on her work. Kale froze for a long moment. "I had a wife," he said finally, his voice heavy with a sorrow that tugged at Clara's heart. "Her name was Nayeli. She died during an attack by the U.S. Army on our village. That's why I became so reckless in battle. I had nothing left to lose." Clara looked up and saw the raw pain in the warrior's eyes. Without thinking, she reached out and gently touched his hand. "I'm so sorry," she murmured. She must have been an extraordinary woman to inspire such love. "She was," he replied, not pulling his hand away. "She was small, delicate, always smiling. Everything you're not." He stopped abruptly, realizing what he was about to say. "Everything I'm not," Clara finished with a sad but unbitter smile. "Don't worry. I know exactly what kind of woman I am and what I'm not. I've lived with that reality my whole life." Kale studied her with new intensity. "Did your family treat you badly?" he asked directly. "They treated me like a constant disappointment," Clara answered with brutal honesty. "Since I was a child, I've been the fat daughter who was good for nothing. My only worth was the Thompson name, and even that wasn't enough to get me a husband." She shrugged, a gesture of acceptance forged through years of pain. That night, as they each retired to their separate rooms, as they had since her arrival, both carried a new understanding. They were beginning to see each other not as strangers forced to coexist, but as two wounded souls who might find solace in each other's company. The months that followed brought subtle but profound changes, both to the Arizona desert and to the hearts of its inhabitants. Clara had created a small medicinal garden behind the cabin, cultivating herbs that thrived in the arid climate. Her hands, once soft and manicured as befitted a lady of society, were now calloused and stained with earth, but they had never felt more useful. Her physical transformation was evident to anyone who had known her before. The constant work under the desert sun had bronzed her skin and strengthened her body. She had lost weight naturally, not through the strict diets her mother had imposed, but through an active life and simple, nutritious food. More significant than any physical change was the new light in her eyes. For the first time, she felt truly useful. Apache warriors from nearby tribes began seeking her out for wounds or illnesses that traditional healers couldn't treat. Clara earned a reputation as a healer who blended ancestral knowledge with Mexican and American medicinal techniques, creating treatments more effective than either tradition alone. "The white woman of the desert can heal what others cannot," the warriors said when they returned to their tribes. Though some elders were wary of an outsider, her results spoke for themselves. Children with dangerous fevers recovered fully under her care. Warriors with infected wounds returned to battle. Women with chronic pain found relief for the first time in years. Kale observed Clara's transformation with a mix of pride and a deeper feeling he hesitated to name. The woman who had arrived months ago as a government imposition had become indispensable, not only to him but to the entire community. Each day he found new reasons to admire her strength, compassion, and adaptability. One full moon night, as Clara prepared a tincture for an elderly Apache woman's arthritis, Kale approached with 2 cups of herbal tea he had learned to make under her guidance. Sharing tea at day's end had become their favorite ritual, a time to talk about everything and nothing as the desert shimmered silver under the moonlight. "Do you miss your old life?" Kale asked, settling onto the wooden bench he had built for these moments. It was a question he had wanted to ask for weeks but hadn't found the right moment. Clara paused her work, gazing at the stars glittering like diamonds in the vast Arizona sky. "I miss my grandmother," she said thoughtfully. "She was the only one in my family who saw me as more than a disappointment. But the rest." She paused, searching for the right words. No, I don't miss feeling useless every day. I don't miss the pitying looks or cruel comments. Here, for the first time, I feel I have a purpose. Cale studied her profile in the moonlight. The months in the desert had transformed not just her appearance but her entire presence. Where he once saw a defeated woman, he now saw a quiet warrior who had found her battlefield in the art of healing. I do miss my old life, he admitted. I miss the freedom to ride through the mountains without restrictions, to hunt wherever I chose, to live by my ancestors' traditions. He paused, his voice softening. But I no longer miss the loneliness. After losing Nayeli, I thought I'd be alone forever. That part of me died with her. Clara turned to him, sensing they were treading into dangerous emotional territory. And now? She asked gently. Now, he said with raw honesty, I wake up each morning looking forward to seeing you work in your garden. I look forward to our nightly talks. I look forward to watching you heal my people. You've brought something into my life I thought I'd lost forever. He hesitated, grappling with words he never expected to say. You've brought hope, Clara. Her name hung between them like a revelation. Tears streamed down Clara's cheeks, but for the first time in years, they were tears of joy. Cale, she whispered. He leaned closer, giving her time to pull away if she wished. When she didn't, he cradled her face in his calloused hands and kissed her with a tenderness that took her breath away. The kiss was soft, reverent, built on months of mutual respect and growing understanding. When they parted, Clara trembled, not from fear, but from an emotion so intense it threatened to overwhelm her. Are you sure? She whispered. I'm everything your first wife wasn't. You're you, he interrupted firmly. You're not Nayeli, and I'm not trying to replace her. You're Clara, the woman who saved my soul when I thought it was lost forever. The woman who found her strength in the desert and taught me that love can bloom in the most unexpected places. The months that followed were the happiest either had ever known. Their relationship deepened naturally, rooted in mutual respect, admiration, and a shared purpose. Clara moved through the cabin with a grace she had never possessed in Arizona's ballrooms, and Cale smiled more often, surprising the warriors who visited. They worked in perfect harmony. He hunted and gathered plants while she tended to patients who came daily. In the evenings, they prepared medicines together, their movements synchronized like a dance perfected through practice. At night, they sat under the stars, talking, laughing, and discovering new facets of each other. My tribe needs to establish new trade routes, Cale confided one night as they gazed at the stars. The medicines you make could be traded for tools and food we need. You could help not just heal bodies but mend relations between our peoples. Clara felt a deep thrill at his words. The idea that her work could have a broader impact gave her a sense of purpose she had never imagined possible. Do you think the other tribes would accept me? She asked, a mix of hope and nervousness in her voice. They already have, he replied with a smile. Your results speak for themselves. But his expression turned serious. There's something else. My older brother has sent word. He's considering a formal alliance between several Apache tribes and wants me to join the negotiations. It means we'd need to travel to territory uncontrolled by the U.S. government. Clara's heart raced. The prospect of greater freedom was exhilarating yet terrifying. What does that mean for us? She asked. Cale took her hands in his. It means we could have a real marriage by my people's traditions. It means you could become my wife, not just a government assignment. It means we could start a family if that's what we want. The word family rang in Clara's heart like a bell. After years of being deemed worthless for failing to produce heirs in an arranged marriage, the possibility of a family built on true love felt like a miracle. But their happiness was abruptly interrupted when riders appeared on the horizon. Cale went on instant alert, recognizing the U.S. Army uniforms even from a distance. Hide in the cabin, he urged. Something's wrong. But it was too late. The soldiers had seen them, and among them rode a figure that made Clara's blood run cold. Her brother, Edward Thompson, accompanied by the captain who had brought her months ago. 5 years later, in a thriving community that had grown around the medicinal clinic Clara and Cale had established, the couple watched the sunset from their porch as their 2 young children played in the garden. The community had drawn families from diverse cultures, seeking a place where differences were celebrated rather than feared. Clara, now a respected matron whose reputation as a healer spanned the region, leaned against her husband's shoulder with a smile of complete contentment. "Do you ever regret it?" Cale asked, as he had many times over the years. "Never," Clara replied, watching their children run among the medicinal flowers they had planted together. "I found my place in the world. I found my purpose. I found true love. What more could I ask for?" In the distance, the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the Arizona sky in gold and crimson, blessing a love story that had begun as a punishment and blossomed into the greatest of gifts. The end.